How is it that a child that young could demonstrate such hate? As I became older, I learned that that's something that is taught. When I grow up, I'm going to change all that. I'm going to be a teacher. Whenever someone asks me, why did you become a teacher? I'm immediately taken back to the story of when I was a kid walking to school. I was about 7 years old, and I'm walking to school, and I would go past this house, and there was this little boy that would ride down his driveway every time he saw me coming, and he would call me an N-word. He spit at me. He would throw sticks at me, and I was just so afraid to go past the house, so I started crossing the street. My father saw me doing that. If you cross the street again, you're gonna have me to deal with when you get home. That meant that I stand up for myself, I do what he was telling me to do, or when I came home, he was gonna beat my butt. The next day, I'm walking to school, and here comes that little boy, and I was scared of him, but I was more afraid of my father. And as soon as I got close to his driveway, here he comes paddling down the driveway like he was just gonna run me over. He's calling me the N-word, and he stops, and he's take those sticks, and he started throwing them at me, and then he spit at me again. Well, I grabbed a stick, and I ran back over to him, and I started wailing him with that stick. She started yelling at me, and and I started yelling back, and I said, every day he picks on me, every day. The next day when I walked past his house, he wasn't out there for the first time, like in a long time, he wasn't out there. In my heart, I knew that that wasn't the right thing to do. But at home, my father was very racist against people that did not look like us. I was getting the hatred and the racism from both sides. And as a child growing up, I knew that there had to be a better way. Going back to my dad, he did not make it easy for his children to fit in. We wore the Star of David. My dad always wore his turban. When we went to school, we were dressed differently from the other kids. And we weren't allowed to say the pledge. We weren't allowed to stand. I had to sit in my chair while all the other students in the classroom stood. He did not feel that this was his country. Yes, he lived here, but he did not feel accepted. Sort of like Colin Kaepernick taking a knee. My father took a knee years before him. The older he became, the more religious he became. He became very abusive to my mom. He would do that right in front of me, and I remember thinking to myself, praying that she would survive the attack, or praying that she would walk out of that room and she would be okay. My father had just become more and more, strange. He started to put locks on the doors inside, padlocks, so we could not get out. We noticed in the basement he had broken all the concrete on the floor. It was down to the dirt. I was 14, and I told my mom, I said, Mom, why don't you leave Dad? Something clicked with my mom, and she told my sister and I, grab everything that you can and get it in a car. And then when we were ready, I got in the car in the back seat, my sister's in the driver's seat, and then she honked the horn one long time. And then my mother knew that was time. So she came out with my dad following behind her. And she told him that she was going to go to the store. And my sister was going to drive her because my mother didn't drive. My dad said, well, leave Rachel here. Yeah, I'm the baby. Leave Rachel here. And he started down off the steps to come to the car. And we were so scared because if he had walked up to the car, he would have saw all the stuff in there. My mother said, Judah, just stay here. I'll go get her. She could stay here with you. I don't mind. So for some reason, it had to be God on our side that day because my father stayed on the porch and allowed my mother to walk down to the car by herself. And once she got close to the car, she opened the door and she jumped in and shut the door and told Dinah to hit it. And my sister was so nervous, but she got it in reverse and we sped out of the driveway and just hit the highway and drove. No idea where we were going, where we would end up. We just drove because we knew we were running at that point for our lives. We made it somehow. We stopped at a store that had like an apartment building, and my mother went in, and the owner just happened to be there. And she just told him, she said, I left my husband. We left with the clothes on our back. We were running for our lives. I have nowhere to go. I don't have a lot of money, but my daughters and I need a place to stay. And I remember he was a white man. All my life, I had been taught racism, but this white man, it gave us a place to stay for as long as we needed it. People that don't look like me, they are not bad. There are good souls out there. And I remember he changed my life that day. He changed my mother's life that day. And we were able to move forward and not look back. And I always said, I don't want to marry anybody that looked like my father, resembled my father in any way.
I think we're going to pause and give you a hug.
Yes. You want it real, that's real. I really believe that there is a higher power, and he was looking out for me as well as my whole family, because he had brought your father into my life.
I've had a whole lifetime of playing music. My father was a big musician, and I started playing music in church with him. And then there were some times when my father couldn't make it to church, and I'd have to lead the congregation on my own at that young age.
One night, I had this friend who came over and he said, let's go out to this jazz club and listen to some jazz or something. I was like, no, the Cosby Show comes on. I want to stay and record watch the Cosby Show. And he said, well, you have one of those VHS recorders. I didn't know how to use it. It always just was blinking 12. He figured it out. So ultimately, we went out to this little jazz club in Milwaukee.
He actually was kind of a boyfriend to a roommate's girlfriend, if you want to go down that rabbit hole, which we don't.
The crew came in to set up, and there was this person with a Dan Becker, the singing machine. He had someone with him who played saxophone live.
Anyway, I kind of knew that this guy was nothing to be feared. So I introduced myself, and one thing led to another.
Hey, hi Marty, how are you? He looks at me and he says, well, Marty, aren't you going to introduce me to your friend? And then Marty introduced us, and I remember shaking his hand, and I just remember thinking his hands were huge. When he walked away, Marty said to me, that son of a bitch, he only came over here to meet you. He was playing his saxophone. Our eyes kept meeting.
Oh, I played for her, absolutely.
It was it was definitely a connection. I think he came over and asked me for my number, and then after that we got together and started, dating, and it was all uphill from there, I should say.
Just look at the results. They speak for themselves.
His family did not know about me initially. He wanted to be more independent before he introduced me to his mother.
She's had her own opinions about what her boys should be and who they should be with and all that. And, initially Rachel didn't fit the mold.
And as time went on, I understood why that was. I was invited over to dinner, and I didn't want to go. I was nervous because I knew that she did not know what color or race I am. I called my mother, of course, and talked to her about it, and she was like, Rachel, you have to go. You need to go and meet her, because if you don't, then you're doing the exact same thing to her that you think she's going to do to you. Nervously went over for dinner. When she opened the door, she had a smile on her face, and she kept that smile on her face, but I could tell from her eyes that she did not approve of me. That night after I left, his mom had a talk with him, and my worst fears came true. She thought that we were both wonderful people, but separately I could do a lot to help my race, and Brian could definitely do a lot to help his race as well, but together, no, that wouldn't work, and she felt that I would hold him back.
No, just the opposite. Yeah, there may be other people who have issues, but she definitely has a positive influence on me.
My oldest sister, Dinah, she wasn't real accepting. She just would say things to me like, Rachel, how can you date him? He's white. Don't people stare at you? Like I said, those who do not accept, I don't care. But those that do, good for you. We're from two totally opposite ends of the world, and there's really no reason that we should have even been together. But we met, and we hit it off, and he got a chance to meet my mom before she passed away, and my mother just loved him. She would run out the door and grab Brian and give him a hug and look at me and say, get the bags,
I was definitely her favorite. She was a great woman that I wish all of my kids had the opportunity to know.
My mother became ill. She was hospitalized. That's where I spent all of my time, and I knew that your dad was really special because he would stay there with me. But the real story is what he did on Christmas Day. So on Christmas Day, my mother had her liver transplant earlier, and she was in and out of ICU, and she had a trach at every tube imaginable coming out, And Brian, who always came to the hospital with me, it was Christmas. I said, go be with your family, go home, blah, blah, blah. I'm going to stay here with my mom. And so he did go and spend Christmas morning and everything with his family, but then he came back to the hospital. Brian came in and he told me, go take a break or something. I was like, no, I don't want to leave or whatever. And so I think I left to go to the bathroom. And while I was gone, he talked to my mother. I didn't know about what. But when I came back in the room, my mother lifted her hand and she took my hand and she laid it on her chest. And then she got Brian's hand from the other side of the bed. She put it on top of my hand. And then she put both her hands on top of ours, and she squeezed our hands like this. And she looked at Brian and she nodded her head. He turned kind of red and he was smiling back at her and shaking his head. I'm thinking, what's happening? And so I was like, Mom, are you okay? And she mustered up all the strength that she had, and she covered her trach. And she looked at me and she said, go home. About 2 weeks later, my mom passed away. A couple months later, my boyfriend proposed and asked me to marry him. And I said, yes, of course, but I said, I wish my mother was here to know about this. And he said, she knows. It just meant the world to me that he was thinking that far ahead. The day I was getting married, I worked at the hospital because I had grown very close to one of my patients that came in on a weekly basis for chemo. She said, aren't you getting married today? And I was like, yeah. She said, what time? And I think I said 3:00. And of course, I did not anticipate her coming, but later that day, when I got married and I was turning around, walking down the aisle as Mr. and Mrs. Quinn, someone reached out and grabbed my arm. And I looked over, and it was my patient. She had gotten out of the hospital and she wore a little turban on her head because she had lost her hair. But she left the hospital and came directly to the church. And she stood up and I gave her a big hug because it meant so much to me to see her there. And I think it really meant a lot to her to actually see me get married. Of course, we left and went on our honeymoon. And then when I came back and went back to work, she didn't show up for her appointment. And I asked about her. I said, where is, so-and-so? I found out that she had passed away. I was really disappointed and I was really sad and hurt. And I just knew that it's time for a change. And of course, we got pregnant with our first child. And working at the hospital was great. I was kind of bounced around to the psych unit, and that was kind of hard to work on with some of the patients that would come in, because there was one day where I don't know, probably was about 7 months pregnant at that point, and I was working with a patient who had restraints, but apparently one of the restraints was looser than what it should have been, and I got kicked in the stomach, grazed a little bit. So I thought, well, I'm going to look into something else that I can do helping people. And I always had teaching, of course, in the back of my mind. And I had some friends who were teachers. So we thought, we're all capable. Let's just start it ourselves. And I would help out when I could. I would do like 3 12-hour shifts at the hospital, and then the days that I had off, I was helping them and working at the preschool. Then I was pregnant with another child, and then eventually their kids were a lot older, and they were in high school by now, some going away to college, and they're saying, okay, we're done. This is yours. You take this and continue it on, and that's how Caterpillar College was born. And here I am, this teacher with this beautiful skin color, teaching all of these children of different races, different skin colors, different eye color, hair color. There was my opportunity.
The preschool moved five times in 5 years, and each time the preschool moved, as a family, we basically gave up a summer.
So by this time, I was tired of moving. And I said, this time when we move, we are putting roots down, and no one can say we're not renewing your lease. We own it.
It was amazing to see how the families would stick with her. So it's kind of an exciting time, all while trying to keep 4 kids fed.
I always like to talk about my kids.
By definition, we didn't exactly squarely fit into a specific group of people.
I have my son, Brian. He's the oldest, Brian Jr.
So we kind of, I'm assuming I can speak for all of us, or just me, got used to the idea of not fitting in.
He created his own company at age 9. I have my other son, Isaac.
It's been very interesting growing up with the mix that we've had.
He does a lot of things with the social media to help promote Caterpillar College.
Whatever path we choose to take, we're going to be successful at it, and it's pretty much all thanks to them.
And so and my other son, Michael.
What do I want to do away from what everybody else thinks?
He helps out on a day-to-day basis with classes, and he teaches Taekwondo at the school.
I want to do martial arts. I've always been interested in it.
And then we have Jonathan, who's my youngest.
Mr. Creator, documenter, youngest of the four.
And he is away at school, but he comes back to do so many things at the school.
I think that growing up we were privileged because we were able to have that benefit of knowing multiple religions.
Well, they all helped all along with the preschool.
So it's a family business. Everybody has a part that they do. And I am so blessed to have each and every one of them because I couldn't do it without them. Looking at today, we were blessed where we have our own building.
To another point, we very rarely advertised because the word of mouth was always so strong.
We have a very different curriculum, like it's very unique, but we also like take it a step ahead and we, teach them about being a good person. So like we focus on so many things that we want to see in kids growing up get better and better, and we're kind of creating that foundation for them. Like the diversity here is amazing. The teachers that we have here, everyone is from a different cultural background.
And I have been blessed with such an amazing team of teachers, of different nationalities. They're standing side by side with me, helping to make this dream a reality. And we are unstoppable.
Like we have called multicultural crayons. Like when we make when we do some sort of activity that includes faces, we include different colors. So just like little things like that to show kids like that you are represented. Growing up, like I didn't have that in school where I could go in and relate to something at school. It was just at home, and at school it was like you're kind of like different. And it was just really sad because, when we would talk about India, like everybody would look at me. That's why it's so important for us to, focus on those things other than academics.
What we do at Caterpillar College is very important.
I mean, I consider Mrs. Quinn as like my mentor. I've learned so much from her, and even sometimes like my mom will say something to me and I'll come to Mrs. Quinn and I'll be like, oh my gosh, what should I do?
My wife had built up such a loyal, loving clientele.
I couldn't ask for a better husband. It was like he was created and made just for me.
I mean, at the end of the day, you feel good, like that you're, making a difference in a child's life, or when they come up and hug you. Like, it's just those little things that really make it worth it at the end of the day.
And I'm just really blessed and amazed with what we have accomplished in our lifetime so far, and all the lives of the other children and families that we have touched for many years. That's weird that it just turned off as we took a break.
That is weird.
Wow. Mama, what you doing? Just quit messing with this equipment. Her spirit flying all through the house.
Oh, it's at 0%, right?